Brainers. So today I'm going to tell you the second part of my pregnancy story. And once again, to clarify, I am not currently pregnant. This is Titus's pregnancy story. So last time we ended off in December, and I believe I told you guys that I was still feeling pretty sick, but I was starting to feel emotionally more secure and excited for Titus, which was a difficult thing, of course, because I am a single mom. So the rest of December began my second trimester, and we're going to talk about the end of December, January, February, and most of March, which is my second trimester. Okay, so everything started out, it was going pretty well. Work was not going very well, though. Things at work were really rocky and just frightening. Some of it was management issues, some of it was me, but I knew I would either be fired or I would have to quit very soon, so that was super on my radar at the end of the year. I actually felt time move for the first time in my 15th week of pregnancy, so that was super exciting. It felt like bubbles that moved the wrong direction, so it just didn't make sense as like gas. I knew it was him, and that was the only time I ever felt him like daintily. After that, he was just like roundhouse punching me, so that's totally him too. I was told in the beginning of January, and this is really where stress came back into the picture. I was living with my roommate, and we were actually renting the top floor of our parents' house. So they had split their house into 2 levels, and we were renting the top floor from them at a really, really good price. So she was pregnant, though, too. She was pregnant and 3 months farther along than I was. And they told me that as of February 15th, a month before she was due, that I would have to find a different place to live. And they told me this, I believe it was the beginning of January. It was early in 2015. And I was so overwhelmingly afraid of this. Like, I knew I couldn't afford rent anywhere. And I wasn't sure where I was going to go, and I was pretty sure I was going to end up being homeless, and that was really scary, and I was really upset for a long time at that. I felt like it was a personal, offense, and I don't know, my feelings are still a little hurt about it. Like, looking back, I understand that would have been a lot for that household to handle, and I really wasn't happy there. It was too rural for me, and they had a wood stove smell, and that smell, they had it constantly because that's how they kept warm, but it made me so nauseous. Like, I puked so much more there than I did anywhere else. And it just wasn't the best situation, but it still hurt to know that I felt very kicked out at the time. Anyway, so that was on my radar in the beginning of January, and that is when I went to a pregnancy crisis center, which one of my friends works at. So I went there, they gave me a lot of numbers to call, and I was put in contact with an organization called Stepping Stones, and they had a shelter for women and children. But at the time, I'm only in my second trimester, and they only allow people who are either already parents or in their 3rd trimester. So I was not far enough along to get into the shelter. So I had this deadline in like a month and a half and nowhere to go. So that's high stress. The good news is, though, this family didn't charge me my rent. So, like, from the time they told me they needed me to move out by that time, by February 15th, to when I actually moved out, they didn't charge me any rent, which was really nice of them. So I was able to save money both for Ty and for figuring out what I was going to do. I ended up quitting my job very early in January. It just wasn't a good situation. And the reason I quit, in part, was because it was a bad situation, but also because I was pretty sure I was going to have to move in with my mom in New Hampshire, in her very small condo, which I knew wasn't going to be the best option. I knew that was a bad choice. I knew we would butt heads. I knew, it was not feasible to fit me, 3 of my brothers, my stepdad, and my mom, plus a newborn in this tiny, tiny little building with a large dog. I just knew it was absolutely not possible. So I was looking for anything else, including, as I said, the shelters I was looking at. So that was a big hit to my pride. Never would I have ever thought of myself as being potentially homeless, ever. So January goes on. My birthday is January 8th, and I was extremely sick at this time. It was actually just a few days before that, I actually was so nauseous I couldn't keep down any fluids for like a good 48 hours, and I ended up going to the ER, put on IV, given Zofran, all that good stuff, and given an emergency ultrasound, which is really exciting. I got to see him for the first time on ultrasound. Let me see if I can find that picture, actually. Should have been more prepared. Oh yeah, here it is. It's not a good picture because once again it was a low, it was an emergency ultrasound, so they weren't looking for like details. But there he is. That was my very first ultrasound picture. He was super shy and kept turning away, but that was really cool to see. Okay, so it was on January 30th that I got my first official ultrasound though. And this was the gender scan. Now, Ty's father was with me during this ultrasound. He was nervous, but at the time I still felt like he was going to be pretty supportive, and I was really proud of him for being there, even though it was uncomfortable for him. And yeah, it was just really cool. I was so sure in my gut I knew I was gonna have a boy, but everyone kept saying it was gonna be a girl, so I was expecting a girl, and I got a boy. So here is that picture right there. There's my little baby at 20 weeks, and that was exciting to know, but it was a really stressful month nonetheless. So that was pretty much the only highlight that month. As my eviction date came, February 15th was my eviction date, I really scrambled for something, and my hero stepped in. My friend Ben, who works on a ship and leaves for like 6 weeks at a time, he said to me that I could stay at his house for in exchange for just keeping his house heated with his pellet stove, which is much less expensive than with like propane. So I took him up on that offer. He has a spare bedroom, and I got to stay at his house while he was at sea. I stayed at his house for the entire remainder of my second trimester, so I was pretty much couch surfing. I was waiting to be in my third trimester so I could go to this shelter. And I moved to his house on Valentine's Day, and the next day my friend's baby was born, so that was earlier than expected. A couple days later, I actually had another repeat anatomy scan, because he was just so stubborn and didn't show us everything. So I'll show you that picture. Here it is. Here he is. He finally showed us his face. And then we are in March. So it was actually in March that Ty's dad, we're calling him Dan, came to stay with me for a little bit at Ben's house. Ben had come back, spent a couple weeks, and now was at sea again, and said that it was okay for my friend Dan to come and stay with me for a few days, just to kind of I don't know, talk about how it was going to look later on and get baby stuff out of the way. And that was a good time, but I will say it was during that time that I started becoming emotionally attached to him, and I think that's almost unavoidable. If you are around the father of your child day in and day out for almost a week, eventually you're going to start feeling emotionally connected and attached. So it was kind of like this thing where for that week I felt like, so emotionally confused. And I know a lot of that was hormones, and obviously a lot of that is the father of my child. And he was actually pretty great. We had a really fun time that week. It was really, I have not laughed that hard in a long time. It was so much fun. A lot of funny experiences, and I don't know, it was just a really good time and left me feeling pretty hopeful. I started having like a visible belly at about 24 weeks. So I was an extremely late shower. Most people would be like, oh, you're pregnant? And I'm like, yeah, my belly doesn't usually stick out that far. I mean, now it does after birth, but it didn't back then. So I don't know, it was just frustrating. I was like, if I'm suffering, if I'm throwing up this much, I should definitely have a belly. This is not fair. The rest of the month of March, I was still at Ben's house. Things were finally getting warmer, and I actually started working at Walmart, which was the shittiest. I'm not gonna lie. Props to you if you work at Walmart, because it is the shittiest job ever. And I worked at Walmart just because I needed some form of income to get me for a couple weeks until I could get into the shelter and start the process um, of looking for housing and such. So that was a horrible, horrible experience, and it was a long commute because the closest one was half an hour away. So that was a lot. My car's a gas hog. It was just terrible, and I was super uncomfortable. I started suffering from sciatica, so my entire leg, and sometimes both of them started getting numb and like tingly and like stabbing pains, to the point where I had to sit down half the time, and oh my word, they threw a big fit about me having to sit down. Like, it was the worst thing ever for them. I had to get a doctor's note to be able to sit down as like a 6-month pregnant person. It was kind of crazy. Bad experience. But those things were done, and I just kept reminding myself, I'm doing this for Titus, and I just kept reminding myself also that he was with me, and I wasn't doing it alone. And that was really comforting. I was really happy to be taking him with me wherever I went. And things were about to change, and some things for the better, and some things for the worse, but I'll talk about that next time. So that's the end of my second trimester. I hope you enjoyed this. If you can relate to anything, let me know in the comments. And congratulations to Heather for winning those adorable suck pads. I hope you take a picture and show us so we can show it off. And we will see you guys next time.